So we're working our way through Exodus this summer, connecting the events of this and themes of this important biblical story with our own story and how our freedom in general and religious freedom in particular is so important for God's people. So far, we've talked about the situation that the Israelites found themselves in during the 400 years of captivity in Egypt, and then how God chose and called Moses to lead the people out of slavery into freedom in the Promised Land, and how God revealed himself to Moses through the burning bush and unveiled his personal name, Yahweh. And on this Independence Day Sunday, for those of us here in America, today we will examine how Moses tried to weasel out of doing what God called him to do. Moses was reluctant. Last week we saw how Moses showed some reluctance to accept God's call to go back to Egypt and lead the Israelites out of captivity. From Exodus chapter 3, verse 11, it says, "But Moses said to God, 'Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?'" Sounds like the song we sang. "Who am I?" Yeah. "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" That was a kind of a soft objection from Moses, almost a false humility kind of thing. It was like he was fishing for compliments from God. He was hoping that God would say, "Oh no, Moses, you're the perfect person for this job. You're amazing, Moses." You know, I know none of you ever do that. I do that from time to time. But God simply reminds Moses, "I will be with you. I will be with you." But then Moses starts to object further by saying, "Well, what if the Israelites ask me, 'Who sent you?'" So God gives him the divine name, Yahweh, so that Moses can identify for the Israelites just which God it is who sent him. But now, in chapter 4, Moses kicks up his reluctance into high gear. Moses is not so concerned with the people of Israel not believing him, that he is God's emissary. He is doubtful himself that he's the right guy for the job. Moses wants proof from God that he really is calling him to go back to Egypt and rescue his people. And so he shifts to doubting that the Egyptians will believe that he really comes from Yahweh. First, Moses argues that the Egyptians will not accept his claim to be a spokesman for Yahweh. So God has him throw down his wooden staff on the ground while God turns it into a snake and then back again into a staff. Miracle, sign. Then God demonstrates his power by turning Moses' hand leprous and back again. Another miracle, another sign. These miracles, and most miracles in the Bible, are given to demonstrate God's power and to convince people of the legitimacy of a prophet's authority or the truth of the prophet's message. Sometimes we call these miracles signs because they point the way or identify God's presence and action in the world. Well, then God has Moses take some water from the Nile River and pour it onto the ground, where God then turns it into blood. Another miracle, yet another sign. And so it seems that Moses is convinced that God is indeed with him and will be with him, so his focus changes to yet another excuse for why God shouldn't send him to do this thing, this great thing. Moses argues that he's not a good speaker. Now, whether or not, as tradition has it, it is that Moses was a stutterer, or that he's just nervous when speaking in front of people. That's a common fear. We don't know. Moses characterizes his speech as slow of speech and slow of tongue in verse 10. So we can't be quite sure what that means. But Moses uses it as an excuse. And so God reminds him of an important fact in chapter 4, verse 11. "Then the Lord said to him, 'Who gives speech to mortals? Who makes them mute or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord?'" Meaning that regardless of Moses' reluctance to speak, God is able to make him fluent and effective because God is the creator of the human mechanism for speaking. So, out of excuses, Moses resorts to pleading. Verse 13, but he said, "Oh, my Lord, please send someone else." He said it that way. It's in the Hebrew. It's please send someone else. And at this, God gets angry, and rightly so. But God gives Moses yet another option. The option that we pastors use and have used for centuries to try and convince a layperson to take on a role in leadership in the local church. He offers to pair Moses with someone else so that he doesn't have to do it all alone. Because, as we all know, leading by committee is so much better than leading individually. So God offers to pair Moses up with his brother Aaron. Exodus 4, verses 14 through 16 says, "Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, 'What of your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know that he can speak fluently. Even now he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, his heart will be glad. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you what you shall do. He indeed shall speak for you to the people. He shall serve as a mouth for you, and you shall serve as God for him.'" So God will use this Moses/Aaron team to effect his will and rescue the Israelites from the oppression of the Egyptians. Oh, and Moses, one more thing. Don't forget your staff. So, what do we learn from this story? We learn that Moses was human and that he has doubts about his own abilities. Maybe he has self-esteem issues. Clearly, in Pharaoh's family there in Egypt, there was never given a presentation trophy to Moses because he had a low self-esteem. Yeah, I thought that would probably get a laugh or something. A little too tender. What did I say? I said, yeah, there you go. A participation trophy, that's what I meant. Yeah. Slow of speech. And I don't know about you, but Moses' lack of self-esteem gives me hope. It's a hope that God can use even me, because I have a self-esteem issue too. I often think that I'm not up to the calling God has on my life. How about you? But that's the thing. God uses ordinary human beings to effect extraordinary divine things. It's really all he has to work with anyway, we mere mortals. Because those who are extraordinary think too highly of themselves to be used by God for the most part. Why? Because God needs humble people. And Moses was humble. Numbers 12, verse 3 says, "Now the man Moses was very humble, more so than anyone else on the face of the earth." God works with humble people because he doesn't have to compete with them. James 4, verse 10 says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, before the Lord, and he will exalt you." And I know, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way. Man, you people are slow. Do I have to get out my guitar and sing the song, for crying out loud? All right, let's sing it. Oh, Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way. There we go. My goodness. Ordinary people like you and me, and ordinary churches like the Fount. Many years ago, this church decided to become a leader in this annual conference, to lead the evangelical churches and to help them to become even more faithful. I can remember long before I came here to be the pastor, there were teams of prayer warriors from this church who came to annual conference in Redlands to pray, to intercede, to do inner healing prayer for people. And through the remarkable work of Pastor John and other leaders, this church has become a leading evangelical church in our annual conference. We were the first church in Calpac to join the Wesleyan Covenant Association. And now churches and individuals all over our conference, and indeed all over the connection, look to us for leadership in finding a way to disaffiliate from the UMC. Ted Smith, back from his hip surgery, thankfully today, our lay leader and an attorney, is in high demand amongst churches far and near. And we have held many WCA events here over the years since 2017 when we joined. And it's my privilege to serve as the president of our Calpac chapter of the WCA. Now, we aren't the strongest church in the conference, but we serve the strongest God of all creation. And we trust in his power and his wisdom. We don't gloat and we don't strut our stuff. And so God is willing and able to use us. And Lord willing, we will be part of the exodus that is coming. So, what is God calling you to do? What are your excuses to not do it? How are you trying to avoid stepping into God's call on your life? I want us to pause for just a few moments and prayerfully consider how God used Moses, how weak and unable he was, and see if there's any reluctance in us, like Moses, to answer God's call. See if there is a call that your heart resonates with from God, that you are reluctant to step into. Let's pause and pray.